My cheating wife tried to get back with me after she cheated on me and I filed for divorce. She came to my house, crying, begging for forgiveness, promising that it would be different, that there was still a chance for both of us. Her words were full of desperation and regret, but she was shocked to see that I was already married to her best friend. At that moment, time seemed to stop. Her eyes fixed on the two of us, as we held our hands, united by a love built in between. To the ruins of what she had destroyed. She never expected this, she never imagined that I, the man she betrayed and humiliated, would move on in a way that would turn her life upside down. It all started 6 months ago, when my life seemed perfect. A stable marriage, a comfortable routine, until everything fell apart with the revelation of a betrayal that I would never have expected. She tried to be discreet, hiding calls, night outs and lame excuses, but the signs were there, blatant. A strange laugh when answering the phone, the smell of a perfume that wasn't mine, an unusual coldness in her touch. I tried to ignore it. We always try, don't we? We try to convince ourselves that it's just paranoia, that love is stronger than that. But blind love is doomed love. I remember the day it all came to a head. It was a Friday night. I got home early, thinking about surprising her, preparing a dinner for two, rekindling that flame that seemed to have faded over time. And there she was, in our room, whispering into the phone. When she saw me, her eyes widened, and she hung up immediately, like a child caught in the act. I couldn't let it go. The pressure built on me like a wave about to break, and the only thing I could say was, "Who were you talking to?" She hesitated. Lied. "With a friend," she said, but the tremor in her voice gave away the truth. I knew there was something more. And that night, after hours of silence, she confessed. She betrayed me. It was as if the ground had opened beneath my feet. It was just one time, it was a mistake, she said, tears streaming down her face. But it was too late. Once trust is broken, there is no going back. I asked for a divorce right away, with the coldness of someone who was already dead inside. She begged me to reconsider, said she would do anything to make things right. But I couldn't even look at her. I left that night, leaving behind not just a house, but an entire life that we had built together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, a feeling of betrayal that burned like fire. I wanted to rip away from me every moment we had, every smile, every touch, every "I love you," that now seemed like a cruel lie. But it was in the midst of this chaos that she emerged. My wife's best friend. She had always been there, through thick and thin, but now, there was something different. A silent understanding, a affection that I didn't notice before. And suddenly, there she was, seeing something in me that I no longer saw myself. With her, I felt alive again. We started meeting, talking, supporting each other. She was my refuge, my new hope. It didn't take long for this friendship to turn into something more. A stolen kiss, a longer than normal hug, it was inevitable. I proposed just a few months later, and we got married in secret. It was a simple ceremony, without guests, but full of love. For the first time in months, I was at peace. I had overcome what seemed insurmountable. But then, she came back. The cheater, my ex-wife, like a ghost emerging from the shadows, trying to relive a past that she herself buried. She knocked on my door, on her knees, asking for another chance. I was wrong, I know, but I can change. We can change. I love you, she said, her voice breaking, holding my hand tightly. I walked away, and that's when she saw, my new wife, her best friend, standing next to me. Her expression was pure shock, a mixture of disbelief and pain that I will never forget. She screamed. He cried. I just stayed silent, looking at her like someone watching a storm pass by. How could you do this to me? She was my friend. How could you too, she said, almost voiceless. But the truth is, at that moment, I didn't feel sorry for her. Just relief. Relief at finally having freed myself from a story that trapped me, from a pain that I thought I would never overcome. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was the real reason behind that unexpected marriage. Something she could never imagine, a twist that would change everything. A betrayal hidden within a betrayal. Something that would only be revealed much later, when all the masks fell and the truth finally came to light. But in that moment, I just smiled, content to watch her drown in the confusion and regret she had created. And it was there, at that moment, that I realized that love, betrayal and forgiveness always go side by side, but not always in that order. How did this all happen? And what was the secret that had not yet been revealed? The real story was just beginning. Welcome to the channel, where you find stories of love, betrayal and consequences. Here, we never support any type of betrayal. On the contrary, our fictional stories are a powerful warning of how infidelity can destroy lives, hearts and families. Each story brings strong lessons and shows the real damage that betrayal can cause. Get ready to dive into a shocking narrative, full of twists and intense emotions. Hold on tight, because this story will leave you breathless. Enjoy. Los Angeles, under the glare of the spotlight and the chaos of traffic, witnessed yet another love story that seemed ordinary to outsiders. However, for Daniel and Helena, the routine had something magical about it. They were the perfect couple, young, in love, ambitious. Daniel owned a small digital marketing company that grew quickly, and Helena, with her discreet charm and deep gaze, was a successful lawyer, known for her professionalism and fearlessness in court. In everyone's eyes, they were a modern and balanced couple, with a history of success and harmony. She had always known how to use words to her advantage, and he, with his confident and calm posture, was the exact balance for Helena's strong temperament. When they were together, it was as if time stopped and everything around them disappeared. And the whole city could see it. Living in a luxurious apartment with a view that encompassed all the urban activity, the two shared an enviable routine: dinners in trendy restaurants, social parties, frequent trips, and intimate moments of pure connection and complicity. Life seemed to follow a perfect script, and Daniel was sure he had found the woman with whom he would spend the rest of his days. He loved the way she challenged him, how their arguments were full of passion and their reconciliations were even more intense. Their life had a vibrant energy, like an ever-burning flame, keeping them both engaged and connected. Helena, in turn, admired Daniel's dedication to work and family. He always knew how to balance his career with time for her, and that made him feel special. Every time he surprised her with a candle at dinner, flowers in the office, or coffee in bed, she felt loved in a unique way. For her, Daniel was the rare type of man, someone who could be sensitive and strong at the same time, who cared about her well-being and made a point of showing his love in small gestures. But like every relationship, there were shadows that hung in the air. Helena was, by nature, an extremely independent woman and always had difficulty sharing her fears and weaknesses. Since she was little, she had learned to be strong and hide any signs of vulnerability. Her mother, a strict and demanding woman, had taught her to never depend on anyone, to protect herself, to always keep a safe distance from people. This made her an unshakable, almost unattainable woman, but it also made her hide from Daniel the darkest parts of her soul, the fears and insecurities that, over time, accumulated. On the other hand, Daniel, always optimistic, did not see these barriers as a real problem. For him, they were just nuances of Helena's personality, part of what made her such a special woman. He believed that, with time, she would open up more and show the more vulnerable side, which he so wanted to know. For Daniel, their marriage was like a book still under construction, with pages that, with patience and love, would be filled together. And there was a third element in this story: Clara. Helena's best friend since college, Clara was a constant figure in the couple's lives. Single, independent and with an infectious smile, she shared many moments with Daniel and Helena, whether at dinners, trips or wine nights in their apartment. Clara and Helena had a deep bond, something that went beyond a simple friendship. They were confidants, soul sisters. Daniel always enjoyed Clara's company, someone who brought lightness and relaxation to the group. He saw her as a sister, an extension of the relationship he had with Helena. Clara had the gift of perceiving unspoken tensions. She knew when Helena was overwhelmed with work, or when Daniel needed time to himself. She was often the balance between the two, always ready to listen and help. When Helena was too tired to go out, it was Clara who convinced Daniel to have a beer at a local bar. And when Daniel needed advice on how to surprise his wife, it was Clara who helped him plan. During dinner on a Saturday night, amid laughter and wine, Clara observed Daniel and Helena in a different way. The looks exchanged between the couple seemed to be filled with something more. There was passion, but also something she couldn't define. Daniel, when talking to Helena, seemed more restrained, as if there was something stuck in his throat, and Helena, in turn, looked away whenever Daniel's eyes met hers. It was a subtle detail, but enough to make Clara wonder if everything was really okay between the two. In the following weeks, Clara tried, unsuccessfully, to get some explanation from Helena for this tension that was in the air. But Helena always diverted the subject, laughing and saying that it was all in her friend's head, that everything was great. Daniel, in turn, became increasingly introspective, as if something was eating away at his spirit. He had started working more, going out for runs at night alone, and Clara knew that, for a man who always made a point of sharing everything with his wife, this change was worrying. One night, after a long work meeting, Helena came home exhausted. He found Daniel on the balcony, looking at the illuminated city, holding a glass of whiskey. There was something dark in his posture, a sadness she had never seen before. She approached, placed her hand on his shoulder and asked softly, "What's going on, love?" Daniel just shook his head, avoiding looking into her eyes. The silence lengthened, and Helena felt her heart accelerate. She tried to start a conversation, ask about work, but Daniel remained silent, as if he was internally fighting something he couldn't express. Finally, after long minutes of silence, he spoke, in a hoarse voice full of emotion, "Helena, sometimes I feel like we're living a lie." Those words hit Helena like a knife. She tried to laugh, to say that he was exaggerating, that maybe it was his tiredness speaking for him. But there was something in Daniel's gaze, something that sent a chill down her spine, as if the ground was about to crumble beneath her feet. He walked away from her, taking the glass to his lips and looking at the horizon, leaving her alone, standing, not understanding what was happening. That night, Helena couldn't sleep. Her thoughts swirled like a storm in her mind, trying to understand what Daniel meant, what was happening to their marriage. She felt something was wrong, but didn't know how to fix it. There was a knot in his chest that grew tighter every day, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, it was there, pulsing, growing. Meanwhile, Clara, who was a constant presence, began to get closer to Daniel. She listened to him, supported him, and he found her a welcoming companion, someone who seemed to understand his silent pain. Helena, in turn, did not notice this closeness increasing, she was so involved in her own dilemmas and thoughts. The city of Los Angeles continued to pulsate around them, with its shine, its parties and its frenetic pace, but, inside that apartment, a story of love, doubts and silences grew, ready to explode into something that would change their lives forever. Of everyone involved. The distance between Daniel and Helena only seemed to grow as the weeks went by. Silence became a third presence in their marriage, an intruder that made a point of installing itself in each room, occupying spaces that were previously filled with laughter and complicity. Daniel spent more time away, arriving late, always with a new excuse about work or traffic. Helena, in turn, tried to pretend that she didn't care, immersing herself in work and trying to fill the void that was growing inside her. She knew something was wrong, but was unable to confront her husband about what was really happening. There was an invisible barrier between the two, a constant tension that seemed to suffocate them every day. Clara became an even greater support for both of them. He was always close by, paying attention to the nuances of Daniel and Helena's expressions. She encouraged them to talk, to go out together, but her attempts seemed in vain. More and more, Clara found herself spending time with Daniel, listening to his frustrations, seeing the pain he carried in his eyes. And it was in these moments, in these deep and intimate conversations, that Daniel seemed to find temporary peace. Clara knew how to be a listener, she knew how to make Daniel let his guard down, how to make him open up about the fears and insecurities that were gnawing at him. She made him feel heard, understood. Things he no longer felt with Helena. One night, Daniel and Clara went out for a drink after a particularly stressful day at work. Helena was at home, exhausted, and didn't have the energy to go out with them. At the bar, amidst laughter and confessions, Daniel allowed himself to lower his defenses even further. Clara, with her penetrating gaze and welcoming smile, made him confess how lost he felt in his marriage, how suffocated he felt by a love that seemed to gradually crumble. And then, it happened, a kiss. An unexpected kiss, but one that carried all the repressed intensity of months of frustrations, desires and silences. For a moment, everything around disappeared. Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a warmth, a connection, a sense of belonging. That night, Daniel returned home not knowing exactly how he felt. There was guilt, of course, but there was also relief, a feeling of having freed himself from something that held him back. He found Helena sleeping on the sofa, with the TV on, as if she had been waiting for him. Daniel covered her with a blanket and stood there, looking at her for a long time. The woman he'd built a life with, but who now seemed so distant, almost like a stranger. The following days were marked by more furtive meetings between Daniel and Clara. They didn't talk about what they were doing, as if silence was a way to keep that forbidden relationship protected from reality. But Daniel knew he was walking a fine line, and Clara seemed to want more. She wanted him to make a decision, to choose between her and Helena. It was a subtle pressure, but it was always there, present in every look, in every touch. Daniel felt torn between the security of his marriage and the new desire that Clara awakened in him. Meanwhile, Helena was sinking into her own doubts. She felt Daniel distant, but she didn't know if it was something she had done or if it was something with him. She tried to confront him several times, but whenever she approached him to talk, he would deflect, change the subject or simply leave the house. It was a painful dance, a constant attempt to get closer only to be rejected. She spent sleepless nights, looking at the ceiling, trying to find answers to questions she didn't even know how to ask. And every time he looked at Clara, his best friend, he felt even more lost. Why couldn't I talk to her about what I was feeling? Why couldn't you share your doubts and anxieties? The silence became a prison. Until one night, everything fell apart. Daniel arrived home late, his expression full of tension. Helena was awake, waiting for him in the living room. When he entered, she stood up and, for the first time, looked into his eyes with a determination she hadn't had in a long time. "Daniel, we need to talk. I can't take this distance between us anymore. What is happening?" Daniel hesitated. He wanted to lie, he wanted to run away once again, but something inside him knew he couldn't continue with that charade. He knew he was about to hurt Helena like never before, but there was no way out. He took a deep breath and felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Then, before she could even find the right words, Helena spoke again, this time in a trembling voice, "Are you, with someone?" The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's gaze gave away the truth before he could deny or lie. Helena took a step back, as if she had been punched, and covered her mouth with her hands, trying to contain the tears that threatened to escape. She felt as if the world had stopped, as if all the love, the trust, the years together had turned to dust in an instant. Daniel couldn't say anything. He just stood there, standing still, staring at Helena, while the reality of betrayal materialized between them, like a barrier impossible to cross. Helena's eyes filled with tears and anger. It was as if everything she knew was crumbling before her eyes, and she didn't know how to deal with it. She wanted to scream, she wanted to hit him, she wanted everything to be a nightmare she could wake up from. "Who is it?" she managed to ask, her voice almost disappearing. Daniel closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and finally said the name he knew would destroy her. Clara. That name. The name that Helena trusted, loved, considered a sister. She felt her world collapse so violently that, for a moment, her legs seemed to weaken. Her best friend, the one she always trusted, who was always by her side. Helena couldn't believe what she was hearing. The betrayal was not only from Daniel, but also from Clara, his confidant, the person who should be his safe haven. The shock, the pain, the anger, everything mixed inside Helena, leaving her speechless, without reaction. She wanted to scream, but the scream was stuck in her throat. She wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come out. And Daniel, standing in front of her, looked as lost as she did, as if he had finally understood the extent of the damage he had caused. But there, in the silence that followed the revelation, something still remained hidden. Something that no one knew, not even Helena. Something that would transform the course of that story even further. Helena spent days in shock. The revelation that Daniel, the man with whom she shared her life, and Clara, her best friend and confidant, were together was like a mortal blow. She couldn't even process the depth of that double betrayal. The memories of happy moments with both of them were now stained by the poison of lies. She spent her days at home, her mind drowning in thoughts, trying to put together the pieces of a puzzle that should never have existed. Daniel, in turn, was lost. I didn't know how to move forward or how to get closer to Helena. The truth was finally exposed, and now he saw clearly how devastating his actions had been. Guilt consumed him every day, but he didn't completely regret his feelings for Clara. Instead, there was a mixture of remorse for having betrayed Helena and a desire to justify to himself the intense connection he felt with Clara. Clara, in turn, was silent. She knew that anything she said would only further inflame the hatred and pain Helena was feeling. She tried to find Daniel to talk, to explain that what happened between them was inevitable, that there was love, that it wasn't just an adventure. But Daniel was distant. The guilt of seeing Helena suffering made him ashamed to look at Clara, as if all the charm he felt for her was a betrayal of himself. Until one day, Helena made a decision. After weeks locked in her house, going over every detail of her marriage and friendship with Clara, she decided she needed answers. It was no longer a matter of feeling betrayed, now, there was a need to understand how it all happened. She needed to hear from Clara, needed to look her in the eyes and confront her best friend. So, Helena arranged a meeting. It was a cloudy afternoon. Helena waited in the park where she used to run with Clara on the weekends, before everything fell apart. The wind was blowing cold, as if anticipating the confrontation that was about to happen. And then Clara arrived. Her eyes were downcast, and she looked hesitant, as if she already knew what was coming. I don't even know where to start," said Clara, as she approached. Helena interrupted her, with a cold and firm voice, "Start at the beginning. Since when have you been together? And how did you have the courage to look into my eyes all these months, knowing that I was sleeping with my husband?" Clara lowered her head and took a deep breath. She knew that there were no excuses that could ease Helena's pain, but she still needed to try to explain. "I needed to show that, no matter how wrong it was, there were reasons behind it all. It wasn't something planned," Clara began, her voice trembling. "It happened in a way that I couldn't control. I saw how he was suffering, how lost he felt. And somehow, we connected. It was, like I was the only person who understood him." "So you thought sleeping with him was the solution?" Helena replied, with tears streaming down her face. "You were the only person I trusted blindly in my life, Clara. You were with me in the most difficult times, and I know." Clara shouted, her voice full of regret. "I know that I destroyed everything, that I was selfish and weak. But, Helena, I didn't plan on falling in love with him. I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. It happened. Helena laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, full of pain. Is this how you justify destroying 2 lives? It just happened. You don't even know what you're saying, Clara. Silence took over for a moment. The 2 women stood face to face, staring at each other, trying to understand how something that seemed so solid collapsed so easily. Helena felt empty, as if all the love, friendship, and trust she had built over the years had been ripped from her soul. And in that emptiness, there was only anger. Do you love him? Helena asked, with her eyes fixed on Clara. Or was it just a game, a way to hurt me? Clara hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. I love him, Helena. And that's why I'm here. I want you to know that, as hard as it is to accept, my feelings for him are real. I know I was horrible, I know you'll never forgive me, but I can't pretend I don't feel anything for him. Clara's words cut Helena like a sharp blade. Everything made sense now, the excuses, the furtive glances, Daniel's coldness. He was in love with Clara. And Clara, even though she was aware of the harm she was causing, was not ashamed to admit that she loved him too. Helena couldn't contain the explosion of emotions. She wanted to scream, she wanted to rip those words out of Clara's mouth, she wanted to go back in time and stop any of them from getting closer. You deserve nothing, Helena said, with a coldness that she herself was unaware of. You don't deserve my anger, my sadness. You and he deserve each other, and you know what else. I hope you are very happy together. Because I never want to look at your face again. Clara just stood there, in silence, watching Helena walk away with quick steps, as if she were running to get away from that reality. She knew that she had lost Helena forever, that bond of friendship would never be restored. And, no matter how much she tried to find a justification for what she did, the weight of guilt crushed her. But that night, something unexpected happened. Daniel knocked on Helena's apartment door, his face marked by tiredness and guilt. When she opened the door, he looked lost, like he was trying to find something he had left behind. I need to talk to you, Helena, he said, almost begging. I know what I did was unforgivable, but there is something you need to know. Something you need to understand before making any decision. Helena hesitated. I wanted to send him away, say that I didn't want to hear anything more from him. But there was something in Daniel's eyes, something that made her stop, make room for him to enter. They sat on the couch, on opposite sides, like 2 strangers who were about to have the most important conversation of their lives. I made a mistake, Daniel began, his voice cracking. I got involved with Clara when I felt that our marriage was falling apart. But I never wanted you to find out like this. I never wanted it to end this way. Then why did you do this? Helena asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Why did you cheat on me with her? Why my best friend? Daniel ran his hands through his hair, as if he was trying to find an answer he didn't have. Because I was lost, Helena. I was drowning. And Clara was there, she understood me, she made me feel like I could breathe again. But I realized something too late. I realized that, in fact, I was looking for something in Clara that I thought I had lost with you. Helena didn't understand what he meant. The pain, the anger, the confusion, it all came together in a whirlwind of emotions that she couldn't control. Helena, Daniel continued, looking into her eyes. The betrayal was a mistake. A devastating mistake. But I never wanted it to be her. I never wanted Clara. And she knew it too. What are you talking about? Helena asked, now with a hint of desperation in her voice. What are you hiding? Daniel took a deep breath, as if he was about to confess something he didn't want to admit. Clara never really wanted to be with me, Helena. She was just trying to fill the void that existed in her life. And I was trying to fill the void that existed in mine. But what I realized, is that the love I feel, the love I've always felt, was for you." Helena's eyes widened. She wanted to believe Daniel, she wanted to find in his words a reason to forgive, to forget. But the wounds were open, deep, and the blood was still oozing out. Helena remained motionless on the sofa, trying to process Daniel's words. A torrent of thoughts invaded his mind, mixing happy memories, feelings of love and pain, and the growing hatred he felt for Clara. Everything she believed she had experienced now seemed part of a cruel and twisted script. Daniel, in front of her, looked small, bent under the weight of guilt and regret. The silence between them was dense, almost suffocating. She didn't know whether to scream, cry, or simply send Daniel away. "Do you think this changes anything?" Helena finally spoke, breaking the silence with a voice that shook with frustration. "Do you think I'll just forget what you did? No matter how much you try to justify yourself, Daniel. You hurt me." Daniel lowered his head, feeling the intensity of Helena's words like blades sinking into his skin. He knew there were no excuses, no promises that would erase the betrayal. Deep down, he didn't even know why he came back that night. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to rescue something, to seek forgiveness, even though it was almost impossible. "I know I can't change what happened," he said, his voice low. "But I needed you to know that I was weak. That I let myself be carried away by something that, deep down, was never real. Clara was never what I really wanted. It was just a way to escape what was happening to us. And now, I'm here, in front of you, wanting to ask for forgiveness. Even though I know that you may never be able to forgive me." Helena closed her eyes for a moment, letting a few silent tears roll down her face. She wanted to be strong, she wanted to show Daniel that he no longer had any power over her. But, at the same time, hearing those words reminded her of who they once were, of the genuine love they had, of the nights they laughed together until dawn, of the promises exchanged. There was an emptiness there, a pain, but also a small flame, hidden beneath all the debris. "And Clara?" she asked, her voice firm. "What will happen to her?" Daniel hesitated. There was no clear answer. Clara had been, for some time, a person who filled a void in her life, but now, everything seemed different. The betrayal was exposed, and everything he saw when thinking about Clara was a reflection of his own weakness. "Clara," he began, choosing his words carefully. "She's not part of what I want right now. I know it seems contradictory, that it's like I'm throwing away something I used. But she's not what I need. Not after realizing the damage we caused." Helena shook her head, in a gesture of pure disbelief. "You say that now, after all. I don't know if I can believe a word that comes out of your mouth." She looked away, avoiding Daniel's eyes, which seemed to beg for understanding. "You say she's not part of what you want, but did you ever know what you really wanted?" Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the pressure of Helena's words. She was right. He had become so lost in his own emotions, in his own doubts, that he no longer knew who he was, nor what he really wanted. But there, sitting face to face with Helena, he felt the need to recover what he had lost, to try, at least once, to be honest about his feelings. "I know what I did was horrible, Helena. And I know I can't expect you to forgive me, not now, not ever. But I want you to know that I still love you. And I want, in some way, to try to make amends for what I did. I don't know how, I don't know if this is possible. But I'm willing to try." Daniel's words echoed in Helena's mind, leaving her confused. She had wanted to hear it for so long, but now that the words came out of Daniel's mouth, they sounded hollow, as if the weight of the betrayal was impossible to ignore. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that there was still something to be saved, but the fear of getting hurt again was paralyzing. The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster. Helena alternated between hatred and nostalgia, trying to decide what to do. She isolated herself from everything and everyone, while Daniel, in turn, distanced himself from Clara. He needed time to think, to understand how everything had gotten out of control, and Clara seemed more like a painful reminder of his mistakes than a companion. One late afternoon, Helena walked through the park alone, trying to find some comfort in the cold breeze that blew through the trees. Her thoughts were racing, and she wondered, for the 1000th time, how it all happened. But more than that, she wondered what she would do now. Would you forgive Daniel? Would you give the relationship a chance? Or would she move on, alone, rebuilding her life without him? The questions came in waves, and each one seemed heavier than the last. It was then that, unexpectedly, she saw Clara in the distance, sitting on a bench, with her face in her hands. Helena hesitated, thinking about simply turning around and leaving. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the need for closure, maybe it was the need to confront the one who was once her best friend. Then, with slow steps, she approached Clara. When Clara looked up and saw Helena standing in front of her, her face contorted in a mixture of guilt and sadness. She knew that Helena had every reason in the world to hate her, and Helena's expression made it clear that the pain was still there, fresh, open. "What do you want?" Helena asked, bluntly. Clara took a while to respond, as if she were choosing her words carefully. I don't expect you to forgive me, Helena. I just want you to know that I never wanted to destroy your life. You were my best friend. And I was selfish. I was so focused on what I felt, what I thought was right for me, that I didn't think about how it would affect you." Helena heard Clara's words, and something inside her changed. The anger was still there, but she felt, for a moment, that Clara was also a victim of her own choices. They had both lost so much, and now they were here, in front of each other, trying to understand where everything went wrong. "And now?" Helena asked. "What will happen now?" Clara looked at Helena, and with a sincerity that she hadn't shown in a long time, she replied, Now I'm leaving. Because I know there is no room for me in your life, nor in Daniel's. And this is something I need to accept." Helena nodded. She knew there would be no reconciliation, there was no erasing what was done. But there, in that moment, she felt a hint of understanding, as if that chapter was finally coming to an end. And as the two women looked at each other, each with their own scars, Helena realized she was ready to make a decision. A decision that would change the course of her life and that would finally free her from all the pain and betrayal that had trapped her for so long. Helena knew she needed a final decision to close that cycle of pain and betrayal that consumed her life for so long. In the days that followed her meeting with Clara, she reflected on her life, on what she wanted for herself, and realized that, above all, she needed to find her own peace. Not by Daniel. Not for Clara. But for herself. It was the only way to move forward, and she was ready. When Daniel finally came back to her, she invited him for one last date at the cafe where they met years ago. It was ironic to be here, in this place that had meant so much to both of them, now that their relationship was in shambles. Daniel seemed nervous, hopeful, as if he thought this meeting was a chance for reconciliation. But Helena knew that wasn't the case. She was there to close a chapter, to put an end to it, with her head held high and the conviction that she was doing what was best for herself. Sitting face to face, the silence weighed like lead, until Helena began to speak. "Daniel, I thought a lot. And I came to the conclusion that you were the love of my life." She said it firmly, but without anger or resentment. "But that doesn't mean it still is." Daniel looked like he was about to interrupt, but she raised her hand, asking him to wait. "I'm not going to lie," continued Helena. "I tried everything I could to find a way to forgive you, to get over it all. But I realized that if I did that, I would be betraying myself. I can't forget what you did. Daniel hung his head, defeated. He knew that her words were definitive, that there was no room for more attempts, nor requests for forgiveness. "So that's it," he murmured, his voice breaking. Helena nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt like she was in control of her life. He reached out his hand to him, and Daniel held it for a moment, his eyes teary. They looked at each other for a few seconds, as if they were saying goodbye to everything they had lived together, to all the dreams and plans that were now nothing more than memories. "I hope you find peace, Daniel," she said, with a sincerity surprising even for herself. "But I need to go my own way now. Without you." And so, with one last handshake, she stood up and left the cafe. Daniel watched her go, feeling like a part of him was being ripped away. He knew he would never get her back, and that he would have to live with the weight of his choices forever. Guilt and regret would be his companions from now on, as he tried to somehow rebuild himself. Helena moved on with her life, allowing herself to rediscover the woman who had been lost amid the chaos of her marriage. She began traveling alone, took up hobbies she had abandoned, and found pleasure in her own company. Every day was a new opportunity for a fresh start. And, little by little, she felt that she was healing, that the pain was turning into a force that drove her towards something greater. And Clara. Clara disappeared from both of their lives. Understanding the extent of her betrayal and the damage she had caused, she walked away. He moved to another city, trying to start over again, away from the memories of what he did. But the guilt did not leave her. She knew she couldn't undo what she had done, and that she had lost both Helena and Daniel forever. And that was his punishment, living with the weight of his choices, carrying the pain of having destroyed a true friendship and of having been part of a love that would never be his completely. Her days became a mix of regret and loneliness, as she tried to discover who she was without Daniel, without Helena. Who would she be now that the mask of false happiness had fallen? What remained was a bitter learning experience, a lesson about trust, love and choices. Each of them, Daniel, Helena and Clara, followed separate paths, marked by a past that would never be forgotten. But, for Helena, that end represented a new beginning. She was no longer the wounded and betrayed woman. She was a woman who had faced the worst and emerged stronger, ready to build a better life, unafraid to face her own feelings, with a new freedom she had never felt before. And so ends another story full of twists, emotions and difficult choices. And you? What did you think of this narrative? Leave your opinion in the comments, we really want to know what you think about how this story ended. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our stories full of drama, love and life lessons. And remember, here, we never support any type of betrayal. Our stories are a reminder of how infidelity can hurt, destroy and transform lives forever. Until next time.